The WWE made $1.3 billion in 2022, has over 1 billion social media followers across all platforms, and WWE events have been viewed in 180 different countries. It's become one of the most successful entertainment companies in the world, and they owe it all to one of the most polarizing men in entertainment, Vince McMahon, who went from a regular ring announcer to having feuds with some of the most popular wrestlers in the world to a billionaire businessman. This is the wild story of how McMahon, both a ruthless CEO and an over-the-top showman, took a small regional wrestling promotion and turned it into a media juggernaut and global empire, while becoming one of the most controversial men in entertainment along the way. Wrestling is in the McMahon family business. Vince's grandfather was a famous wrestling promoter, and Vince's dad founded a regional league called Capital Wrestling Company, which would later become the WWF. Vince joined the family business when his dad brought him on as a ring announcer. In 1982, Vince took over the business from his father. Well, took over might be a little generous. He bought the WWF from his dad for over $1 million. But Vince had a specific vision for it, to drive everyone else out of business and make the WWF global. Those close to him claimed that if his dad knew what he'd do with the company, Vince McMahon Sr. would never have done the deal. Vince Jr. first struck a deal with the family that ran pro wrestling in Southern California, giving him control of the LA market, as well as the New York market that he was already in. Then came a game changer. Vince turned to television. At the time, one of his major rivals was Georgia Championship Wrestling and the TV show. So, he bought a controlling stake in GCW without telling anyone. And in 1984, at the start of GCW's usual show, Vince came on and told the audience that he now owned the company. One wrestling fan compared it to watching the State of the Union on TV, and suddenly it's the president of the Soviet Union coming to the podium instead of the US president. It was a move that sent shockwaves around the industry in a day the wrestling world calls Black Saturday. The World Wrestling Federation was expanding, and quick. With GCW already having a deal with Turner Broadcasting, Vince now had the TV deal that he wanted. No one had seen anything like this in the wrestling business. Vince was going out and buying his competitors. The trend continued as Vince turned his eyes to the American Wrestling Association. A 6'8" giant named Hulk Hogan was on the rise over there, and was so popular, it sparked a movement called Hulkamania. So, Vince offered Hogan a massive amount of money to come to the WWF, which included TV money and licensing deals. According to Hogan in a later interview, he said it was a 10-year deal and claimed it was the first guaranteed contract in pro wrestling history. From there, McMahon's next business move was to create a new event called WrestleMania, a one-night event at Madison Square Garden featuring the biggest names in WWF as well as celebrity referees. Mr. T and Hulk Hogan even hosted SNL the night before WrestleMania. And with all the hype Vince had manufactured around it, WrestleMania drew 1 million viewers on pay-per-view, which was groundbreaking for a pro wrestling event at the time. It also kick-started the WWF using the pay-per-view model for major events. WrestleMania launched what is now known as the golden era of the WWF. In 1985, they brought in $63 million, more than double the amount from the previous year. And in '87, the WWF held its most successful event ever, WrestleMania 3. It consisted of 12 matches, with the main event being World Heavyweight Champion Hulk Hogan going up against Andre the Giant. The event set the record for the largest attendance at a live sports event in North America, with 93,173 people in the audience. The WWF earned $1.6 million in ticket sales alone, and about $10.3 million in pay-per-view revenue, which was a record at the time. Hulk Hogan's body slam to defeat Andre the Giant sent WrestleMania 3 into wrestling lore as one of the greatest ever, and pro wrestling's popularity was at an all-time high. Under Vince's reign, the product he was creating became more attractive, TV-friendly, and entertaining. Flashy graphics, theme music, and it had a more sports game feel to it. Vince even called it sports entertainment. But in the early 90s, Vince's meteoric rise started to derail. the Department of Justice started looking into the WWF for allegations of sexual abuse of minors. The DOJ also charged Vince and his company, Titan Sports, for the illegal use of steroids. But Vince, being both a shrewd businessman and showman, chose a unique way to respond. In 1997, in an event now known as the Montreal Screwjob, he flipped the script on Bret Hart, who was leaving for World Championship Wrestling, featuring himself in the storyline, and Vince emerged from the event known as Mr. McMahon, the brand new biggest villain in pro wrestling. The controversial move worked wonders and kicked off the Attitude Era in the WWF. In 1999, Vince and his company enjoyed their best year up to that point, bringing in $250 million in annual revenue. Then McMahon made a bombshell announcement. The WWF was going public. Another risky, controversial move, but it worked wonders. The company went from being valued at $172 million to later being worth a mind-blowing $5 billion. In 2001, Vince finally took down World Championship Wrestling for good, buying the company for $2 million. In 2002, Vince rebranded the WWF as the WWE, thanks to a lawsuit from the World Wildlife Fund. To keep generating revenue streams, Vince had a series of business moves, some of which worked, and others that didn't. He tried to take the WWE's popularity and create the XFL, a more violent version of the NFL, but it flopped badly. In 2014, he launched WWE Network, a streaming service that carried the WWE's massive video library. The service gained 1.5 million subscribers, but in 2021, the WWE struck a deal with Peacock, worth around $1 billion over 5 years, to put the WWE's content library on Peacock. It wasn't the only large deal Vince had made recently. In 2018, the WWE announced a 10-year deal with the Saudi General Sports Authority that would earn the WWE $50 million a year. Still, the WWE's popularity was declining. Between December 2019 and March 2020, WWE shares plummeted more than 40%. The pandemic, of course, then hurt ticket sales for live events, and Vince's lowered net worth dropped him out of Forbes' list of the 400 wealthiest Americans. In 2022, Vince had to step down as CEO and chairman of the WWE amid an investigation into sexual abuse allegations. Even outside of that, Vince was always known to not treat his employees too well, with comedian John Oliver and politician Andrew Yang both publicly calling out McMahon for not providing WWE talent with health insurance, retirement accounts, or even paid leave and workers' compensation. In 2023, Vince made a stunning return to the WWE and reinstalled himself as chairman. But he then promptly sold the company to Endeavor, the parent company of the UFC, for $9.3 billion. That's more than Disney paid for the rights to Star Wars and Marvel combined. As part of the deal, Vince would continue as chairman of this merged WWE-UFC company, and there's no doubt that the drama and the fireworks aren't even close to being over. To this day, Vince McMahon is still controversial and still polarizing. But for a guy who took over his father's regional wrestling promotion in 1979, he built a global phenomenon. He's almost single-handedly transformed the way the world views pro wrestling. And no matter how you feel about him, as a businessman, as a showman, a wrestler, or even as a villain, there's no denying the massive empire he's built, and that he's had a lasting impact on both the sports and entertainment worlds for years to come. So, what are some of your most memorable WWE moments? Do you think that the WWE will ever regain the popularity and viewership that it had in the late 90s and early 2000s, when superstars like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Stone Cold Steve Austin were two of the biggest rivals in history? Let us know in the comment section below. And as always, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.